Claire Morgan stood in the Aurelia ballroom of the Sovereign Hotel, wearing white silk and a calm smile, as the final notes of music faded around her. She was 26 years old, newly married, and officially the wife of Ethan Blackwood. Hundreds of guests filled the room only moments earlier, but now they were leaving, watched by silent men in tailored suits. The wedding had been perfect, polished and powerful, designed to impress and intimidate at the same time. White roses spilled from crystal arches, champagne flowed without pause, and every smile carried careful meaning. Claire moved through the reception like someone playing a role she had studied well. She had practiced how to stand, how to laugh, and how to belong beside a man feared across the city. Ethan Blackwood had stood at her side, calm and distant, his hand steady on hers. He had kissed her when the vows ended, and the room had erupted in applause. Claire had almost believed the story being told around them. After the final toast, a tall man with sharp eyes approached her quietly. Sergei Volkov, Ethan's head of security, spoke without emotion. "Mr. Blackwood is waiting for you upstairs," he said. The words tightened something deep in her chest. The penthouse suite waited above, the place meant for their wedding night. Claire followed Sergei to the elevator, lifting her dress with careful hands. The ride upward felt longer than the ceremony itself. Mirrored walls reflected a woman who looked composed and expensive. When the doors opened, the city spread out in light beyond the glass. Rose petals covered the marble floor and candles flickered in quiet rows. Ethan stood by the window with his back to her. He did not turn when she entered. "Close the door," he said, his voice flat. The sound echoed too loudly in the wide space. Claire stepped forward, searching for warmth that never came. "Something is wrong," she said carefully. Ethan finally turned, and the look on his face drained the air from the room. There was no softness there, only calculation. "Sit down, Claire." She obeyed, her dress pooling around her feet. Ethan retrieved a thin folder from a nearby desk and placed it on the table. "Open it." Claire hesitated, then lifted the cover. Legal words filled the page, sharp and final. "Divorce papers." Her mind refused to accept what her eyes were seeing. "We have been married for hours," she whispered. 3 hours, Ethan replied. "Sign tonight and this ends cleanly." Claire looked up at him, disbelief giving way to pain. "Why?" she asked. "Because I love someone else." The word struck harder than any blow. Her breath caught, but she forced herself to stay still. "Who is she?" "Irina Michailova." The name carried weight and danger. Claire understood immediately what it meant. Irina was powerful, connected, and ruthless. This marriage had never been about love. Ethan explained without emotion that circumstances had changed. The alliance he wanted now required someone else. The words were smooth, practiced, and cruel. He spoke of compensation, protection, and discretion. Money would be provided and silence would be required. There would be an agreement preventing her from speaking. If she broke it, consequences would follow. The threat was quiet but absolute. Claire realized then that she was no longer a wife. She was a problem to be managed. Her hands trembled as she reached for the pen. The room felt cold despite the candles. Ethan turned back to the window, already finished with her. Claire signed the first page slowly. Then the second. Then the last. Each signature felt like a door closing. When she finished, she placed the pen down carefully. "This is done," Ethan said. Claire stood, smoothing the front of her dress. She felt strangely calm. The fear had burned into something harder. Without another word, she turned toward the door. Ethan did not stop her. He did not look back. The marriage had ended before it had begun. As Claire stepped into the hallway, the weight of what had happened settled fully. She had entered the night as a bride. She was leaving it alone. Behind her, the city lights continued to glow, indifferent and bright. Claire walked forward without looking back. Every step felt heavy yet certain. The night had stripped away illusions she did not know she carried. Hours earlier, she had believed marriage meant safety. Now she understood it had been a transaction. Ethan had chosen efficiency over loyalty. He had measured her worth and found it lacking. The papers she signed ensured silence and obedience. They protected his future, not hers. The threat did not need to be spoken aloud. Power surrounded Ethan like armor. Defiance would have been crushed without hesitation. Claire accepted that truth as she walked. She had survived worse moments in her life. This betrayal was clean, sharp, and final. There were no lies left to uncover. The marriage existed only on paper now. The love had never existed at all. As the elevator doors closed, Claire exhaled slowly. Her reflection stared back with clear eyes. The woman inside the mirror was not broken. She was changed. The night had taken something from her. It had also given her knowledge. Trust could be dangerous. Dependence could destroy. Love offered without power was fragile. Claire straightened her shoulders. She would not beg, plead, or break. What came next was unknown. What mattered was that she had survived this night. The papers were signed, the truth revealed. The marriage was over. Claire walked forward into the quiet halls alone. Behind her, a powerful man returned to his plans. Ahead of her lay uncertainty and silence. She did not yet know what she would become. She only knew she would endure. The wedding night ended without love or mercy. Claire Morgan stepped into her future, no longer a bride. The betrayal was complete, and the silence sealed it forever. Nothing from that night could be undone. Sergei Volkov arrived just before dawn. He did not knock. He did not greet her. He simply stood inside the doorway of the penthouse hallway, hands folded behind his back, waiting. Claire Morgan followed him without speaking. Her wedding dress had been replaced with plain clothes provided overnight. Nothing she owned remained with her. The ride down was silent. No one looked at her. No one offered comfort. She understood that this was not kindness. It was procedure. The marriage was finished and now removal had begun. She was no longer a guest. She was an item being relocated carefully and quietly. The car waiting outside was black and unmarked. Sergei opened the door and Claire entered without resistance. The city passed by in long gray stretches. Sergei finally spoke. "You are being moved to Brookhaven district. You will stay there. Your expenses are covered. You will follow instructions." His tone carried no anger, only certainty. Claire asked how long. Sergei replied, "As long as required." That answer told her everything. There was no timeline. There was no promise. There was only control. She looked out the window and memorized the streets as if knowledge itself could be a shield. The apartment was clean, modern, and empty. Brookhaven district felt quiet, removed from the city's pulse. The building had security cameras at every entrance. Sergei walked her through the space. One bedroom. One bathroom. Kitchen stocked weekly. Internet access monitored. Phone provided. You will not leave the district without approval. Visitors are not permitted. Employment is forbidden. Public statements are forbidden. Your signature already confirmed this. His words landed carefully like bricks being stacked. Each rule closed another door. Claire nodded, listening, understanding that questions were pointless now. Later that evening, the surveillance revealed itself. Cameras inside the building were obvious. Others were not. Claire noticed the slight hum behind the walls, the delay when she opened certain doors, the way the provided phone warmed even when unused. Someone was always watching. Not closely. Not emotionally. Simply enough to ensure compliance. The system did not care how she felt. It only measured movement, silence, obedience. Claire tested nothing. She learned quickly that resistance here would not be dramatic. It would be erased quietly. The rules arrived printed and unsigned, slid under her door. They were clear. Do not contact Ethan Blackwood. Do not contact Irina Michailova. Do not speak to press. Do not travel. Do not associate. Silence was not optional. It was enforced by consequence rather than explanation. Claire read each line slowly. The document never named her as a threat. It described her as exposure. A risk. Something that could complicate carefully built plans. She was not hated. She was inconvenient. That realization cut deeper than cruelty ever could. Days passed without markers. Food arrived on schedule. Cleaning occurred when she was absent. Every routine felt designed to remove choice. Claire stopped trying to make sense of time. Instead, she watched patterns. Sergei appeared twice without warning, checking nothing, saying little. Each visit reminded her that this exile was active, not forgotten. Someone was still invested in keeping her contained. She began to understand that her silence was valuable. Her existence was permitted only because it was controlled. One morning, Claire stood at the window and watched people move freely below. They laughed, argued, hurried, lived. She remained behind glass. It became clear then. She was not being protected. She was being stored. The apartment was not safety. It was storage space for a mistake that had not yet faded. The realization settled heavily but cleanly. Fear gave way to clarity. If she was being watched, then she mattered. Not emotionally. Strategically. Claire accepted the truth without tears. She was a liability. Controlled. Measured. Kept quiet because she knew too much by accident. The marriage had given her proximity, and proximity created risk. That was why she was here. Not punishment. Prevention. She sat on the edge of the bed and breathed steadily. Power did not destroy her. It sidelined her. and sideline pieces could be moved again when needed. That night, Claire turned off the lights and lay awake, listening to the building breathe. She did not plan rebellion. She did not imagine escape. She simply acknowledged the shape of her new life. This was exile without borders, imprisonment without bars. And within it she remained visible, tracked, alive. The thought settled calmly in her chest. If she was a liability, then she would learn why. And knowledge, she knew, could not be monitored forever. The days in the Brookhaven apartment lost their names. Morning, afternoon, and night blended into one long stretch of quiet. Claire Morgan woke, ate, and slept without urgency. The walls were beige. The furniture was beige. Even the light felt beige, soft and dull, as if color itself had been removed on purpose. Silence pressed against her ears until her own breathing sounded too loud. There were no voices, no footsteps, no signs of human closeness. Isolation did not arrive suddenly. It crept in slowly, tightening around her thoughts. At first, Claire told herself the quiet was temporary. She imagined it was meant to calm her. But calm never came. The silence sharpened her awareness. She began to notice the way the apartment responded to her presence. The hallway light flickered 1 second after she stepped outside. The elevator paused before opening, as if waiting for permission. When she stayed in one room too long, the air felt heavier. These were not coincidences. They were patterns. And patterns meant surveillance. Claire started to test small movements. She changed her routine by minutes, not hours. She moved furniture slightly, then returned it. She spoke aloud once, just to hear her own voice. The sound echoed strangely. Later, she noticed the phone on the table warming again. Someone had listened. She was not alone in the apartment, even when she was physically alone. The realization made her stomach twist. Privacy had been removed quietly, like a privilege she had never noticed until it was gone. Every week, money appeared in her account. The amount never changed. Enough to live comfortably. Enough to keep her from asking questions. Along with the deposit came a message. Always brief. Funds provided under agreed conditions. No contact. No statements. No movement outside the district. The words were polite, almost respectful. They never mentioned punishment. They never needed to. The money itself was a reminder. Silence was being purchased again and again. At first, Claire accepted the payments with numb gratitude. She told herself it was practical. She had no income. No support system. The money kept her safe. But over time, the deposits began to feel heavy. Each payment felt like proof that her life had been reduced to a transaction. She was not trusted. She was managed. The money did not represent care. It represented control. And control, she slowly understood, was more suffocating than fear. One afternoon, the pressure broke. Claire sat on the kitchen floor and stared at nothing. Her chest tightened, her breath came unevenly, and tears arrived without warning. She cried quietly at first, then harder, covering her mouth to keep the sound from carrying. She mourned the life she thought she had. She mourned the woman who had believed marriage meant partnership. She mourned her own silence. The collapse was not dramatic. It was private and complete. When the tears ended, exhaustion followed. Claire rested her head against the cabinet and closed her eyes. In the emptiness that followed, something shifted. She saw herself clearly for the first time since the wedding night. She was not broken. She was paused. And pauses could end. The system around her depended on her being passive, quiet, grateful, predictable. That realization sparked anger, but it also sparked clarity. Claire stood and washed her face. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back was tired but alert. She did not look defeated. She looked restrained. And restraint could be studied. She began to replay every rule in her mind. Every pattern. Every delay. Knowledge formed slowly, but it formed. She realized that surveillance meant attention. And attention meant she still mattered. That night, Claire sat at the table and made a decision. She would stop waiting. She would stop shrinking herself to fit the silence. She would not rebel openly. That would be foolish. But she would observe. She would learn. She would gather understanding the way others gathered power. Passivity had kept her contained. Awareness would keep her alive. The beige walls no longer felt empty. They felt temporary. The quiet no longer felt endless. It felt instructive. Claire lay down and closed her eyes with purpose. She did not know what came next. She only knew that she would not remain invisible forever. The prison was real, but so was her mind. And for the first time since exile began, she felt awake. Claire Morgan discovered the Brookhaven Civic Trust by accident. It appeared on her phone screen one quiet morning while she scrolled through local listings, searching for something harmless enough to pass the time. Community support. Public records. Volunteer services. The words sounded small, safe, and forgettable. That was what made them useful. The organization operated from a modest building at the edge of the district, far from attention and far from power. Claire read every line twice. Volunteering was allowed. It was not forbidden. The rules did not mention it. She prepared carefully before going. Neutral clothes. No jewelry. Nothing that suggested wealth or association. The building itself was plain, brick and glass, with a faded sign by the door. Inside, the air smelled of paper and coffee. People moved with purpose but without urgency. No one looked at her twice. That alone felt like freedom. Claire approached the front desk and asked about volunteering. Her voice remained steady. She offered no explanations. Margaret Whitfield, the administrator, greeted her with polite warmth. Margaret was older, composed, and observant. Her eyes measured people quickly, not with suspicion but with assessment. She asked Claire simple questions. Availability. Skills. Motivation. Claire answered honestly but carefully. She said she wanted to be useful. Margaret nodded as if that answer meant more than it seemed. Within minutes, Claire was given a badge and a chair. The work was basic at first. Sorting files. Updating records. Organizing donations. Claire moved through the tasks quietly, absorbing everything. She noticed how information flowed. Which documents were touched often. Which ones were ignored. She listened to conversations without appearing to listen. Margaret checked on her twice, watching how she worked rather than what she said. Claire sensed approval but not trust. Trust would take time. Days passed and Claire returned regularly. The routine settled easily. The civic trust felt different from the apartment. It had texture, sound, purpose. Claire felt her mind stretch again, engaging with order and detail. She began reorganizing records that had been left untouched for years. Donation logs. Expense sheets. Grant reports. The work was calming. Patterns revealed themselves naturally. Numbers repeated. Timelines overlapped. Small inconsistencies appeared. Claire did not rush. She understood restraint now. She made notes only in her head. She compared entries quietly. A donation log twice. An expense category too broad. Transfers marked complete without supporting documents. None of it screamed crime. It whispered carelessness. Or design. Claire continued working as if nothing had changed. Her expression never shifted. Her questions remained practical. No one suspected anything. Margaret noticed the improvement in organization quickly. Files were easier to locate. Reports made more sense. She thanked Claire once briefly. That was enough. Claire did not seek praise. She sought understanding. By the end of the second week, she could map the trust structure without looking. She knew who approved what. She knew where delays occurred. She knew where attention was lacking. One afternoon, while reviewing archived records, Claire saw the pattern clearly. The irregularities formed a shape. Not theft. Not yet. Redirection. Funds moving through approved channels but landing in unexpected places. Everything technically allowed. Everything just off enough to matter. Claire closed the file and placed it back carefully. Her heart beat faster, but her face remained calm. Discovery did not require action. Not yet. When she left the building that day, Claire felt different. Not powerful. Aware. The civic trust was small, but it touched many things. Money moved quietly through it. Influence passed unnoticed. She realized that usefulness created access. And access created opportunity. For now, she would remain a volunteer. Helpful. Invisible. Learning. That night, back in the beige apartment, the walls no longer felt empty. Claire had made her first move without breaking a single rule. She had stepped into the world again, softly. No alarms had sounded. No warnings arrived. The system watched, but it did not object. Claire lay down and closed her eyes, certain of one thing. She was no longer waiting. Claire Morgan did not announce herself as capable. She let the work speak. At the Brookhaven Civic Trust, she arrived early and left late, never asking for recognition. Files were no longer misplaced. Reports stopped conflicting with each other. Donation records aligned with expenses in ways they never had before. People began to rely on her quietly, the way people rely on something that works without drawing attention to itself. Claire noticed the shift before anyone said it aloud. Requests landed on her desk without explanation. Questions were directed to her naturally. Competence, she learned, did not need to be loud to be powerful. Margaret Whitfield watched this change carefully. She did not interfere. She allowed Claire space to move, to organize, to improve systems that had long been accepted as messy but harmless. When Claire suggested small adjustments, Margaret approved them without hesitation. It became clear that Claire saw structure where others saw routine. She did not just complete tasks. She understood why they existed. That understanding made her valuable. The encounter with Mr. Liang Zhao happened on an ordinary afternoon. He arrived without ceremony, dressed simply, carrying himself with calm authority. Claire recognized him immediately from records and correspondence. He was a major donor. Not a public one but a consistent one. His name appeared often, always attached to large figures and vague descriptions. Margaret greeted him warmly and introduced Claire as one of their most reliable volunteers. Mr. Zhao studied Claire for a moment longer than politeness required, then nodded. He asked Claire questions that sounded casual but were not. How long she had been there. What systems she worked on. Whether she enjoyed the work. Claire answered clearly without embellishment. She did not flatter him. She did not appear impressed. That neutrality seemed to interest him more than enthusiasm ever could. He thanked her for her effort before leaving. The interaction lasted only minutes, but it lingered in Claire's thoughts. After that day, Claire paid closer attention to transactions linked to Zhao Holdings. She did not investigate openly. She observed. She noticed how money entered clean and left complicated. Funds moved through layers of approval, always within policy, always just difficult enough to track. Claire saw how the trust functioned as a soft channel. Legitimate on the surface. Flexible underneath. It was not theft in the obvious sense. It was laundering dressed as generosity. Claire did not react. She did not record anything. She did not confront anyone. She understood restraint now. Observation was safer than action. Knowledge was currency. She continued working as she always had, improving efficiency, tightening loose ends without closing doors. Her competence made the system smoother, not stricter. And because of that, no one feared her. Over time, Claire became essential. When questions arose, they went to her. When reports needed clarity, she handled them. Margaret relied on her judgment without realizing how fully. Even Mr. Zhao returned, this time asking Claire directly for assistance with reconciling a complex report. He watched her work. He saw how quickly she understood the flow of numbers. How easily she saw what others missed. He did not praise her. He remembered her. The offer came quietly. Margaret called Claire into her office one evening and closed the door. "We would like to keep you," she said. "Officially. But part-time. Flexible." Claire listened without changing expression. The role was administrative, but the access mattered more than the title. She accepted calmly. The contract was modest. The significance was not. Claire walked home that night aware of the shift. She was no longer just present. She was useful. And usefulness created leverage. No rules had been broken. No alarms raised. She had stepped deeper into the system by being exactly what it needed. The surveillance still existed. The restrictions remained. But now she had purpose within them. Lying in bed, Claire allowed herself a small smile. Becoming useful had changed everything. Claire Morgan met Lucas Reed on a Tuesday that looked like every other Tuesday. The sky was gray, the streets quiet, and the Civic Trust moved at its usual steady pace. She noticed him before he spoke to her. He stood near the back offices, dressed plainly, holding no documents, watching everything without appearing to watch it all. He did not introduce himself immediately. He waited until she finished a task, then stepped into her path with an easy smile that did not reach his eyes. Lucas Reed spoke her name like it was already familiar. Claire did not ask how he knew it. She had learned that such questions rarely produced honest answers. Instead, she acknowledged him and listened. He explained that he represented interests aligned with stability, oversight, and long-term continuity. The words sounded harmless. The meaning beneath them was not. Claire recognized the tone. It was the language of power pretending to be polite. They walked together out of the building, their conversation casual enough to draw no attention. Lucas spoke clearly and without urgency. He told her that her work had been noticed. That competence did not stay invisible forever. Claire understood the warning beneath the compliment. Visibility was not safety. It was exposure. Lucas confirmed it gently. "You are visible now," he said. "People who were not watching before are watching." They stopped near a quiet corner cafe. Lucas did not suggest sitting down. This was not a meeting meant to linger. He told her about a higher structure operating beyond the Civic Trust. A syndicate council that coordinated influence quietly across industries, charities, and institutions. It did not operate loudly. It did not appear in records. It adjusted outcomes rather than events. Claire absorbed the information without reacting. This was not a confession. It was an invitation framed as education. Lucas warned her that remaining passive would no longer protect her. Her usefulness had made her noticeable. Others would approach her soon. Some would not be patient. He spoke without threat, but the implication was clear. Claire could be pulled in directions she did not choose if she remained unprepared. He offered her something different. Guidance. Time to understand the landscape before it decided for her. The offer was not formal. It was possibility. Lucas told her she could learn how systems really worked, how decisions were shaped long before they appeared final. He did not promise power. He promised perspective. Claire asked what he wanted in return. Lucas smiled slightly. He said consideration. Nothing more. No commitments. No contracts. Just openness to conversation. They parted without shaking hands. Lucas did not give her contact information. He said she would find him when ready. Claire returned to the civic trust with her thoughts steady but alert. The warning echoed clearly. She was no longer unnoticed. The beige prison had taught her patience. Becoming useful had brought attention. Now attention demanded choice. That evening, Claire sat alone and reviewed everything carefully. The syndicate council explained patterns she had sensed but not named. Control did not come from one place. It flowed. Lucas Reed was not a rescuer. He was a messenger. The offer was larger than safety. It was knowledge. Claire did not accept. She did not refuse. She decided only one thing. She would consider. Claire Morgan was not told where she was going until the car turned underground. The entrance was hidden beneath an ordinary office complex, unmarked and guarded by silence rather than signs. Lucas Reed sat across from her, calm and unreadable. Neither of them spoke as the elevator descended. Claire felt no fear. By now, fear had been replaced by awareness. This was not a trap. It was a threshold. The room she entered was wide and circular, designed to remove hierarchy from its shape while reinforcing it through presence. 5 people sat spaced evenly around a long polished table. The lighting was soft but intentional, highlighting faces without casting shadows. Margaret Whitfield was there, seated calmly, hands folded. That alone told Claire this council was real. Beside Margaret sat Richard Hale, composed, sharp-eyed, and attentive. The others remained unnamed, their authority evident in their stillness. Claire was invited to sit, not commanded. That detail mattered. Lucas took a position behind her, silent. The council did not waste time. They explained what the civic trust truly was. A testing ground. A channel. A place where influence could move without drawing attention. Claire listened without interruption. Nothing they said surprised her. It confirmed conclusions she had already reached alone. She was then asked one question. What would you change? Claire did not rush her answer. She stood, walked to the center display and began to speak clearly. She outlined inefficiencies she had observed, overlaps that weakened control, redundancies that created exposure. She proposed restructuring flows without tightening them. Visibility without restriction. Order without alarm. Her strategy did not remove power. It protected it. As she spoke, the room changed. Margaret leaned forward slightly. Richard Hale nodded once, slowly. Claire explained how small adjustments could increase reach while reducing risk. How silence worked best when systems felt helpful rather than controlling. She did not frame her ideas as rebellion. She framed them as preservation. When she finished, the room was quiet. The council did not applaud. Approval came differently. Margaret spoke first. She said the strategy showed restraint and intelligence. Richard added that Claire understood balance, which was rare. The others exchanged looks that confirmed agreement. Claire did not smile. She understood the weight of what was happening. Authority was granted carefully. Not loudly. Not fully. Claire was given oversight over a specific operational segment tied to restructuring. Limited. Observed. Real. The first assignment followed immediately. She was tasked with stabilizing a vulnerable channel without drawing attention. The details were precise. The expectations were clear. Claire accepted without hesitation. As the meeting ended, Claire remained seated for a moment longer. She understood that she had crossed into something permanent. This was no longer exile. It was participation. The council dismissed her without ceremony. Lucas followed her out. In the elevator he spoke once. Welcome. Claire did not respond. She already understood. Claire Morgan began the work quietly. There were no announcements, no visible changes at first. The instructions she had received were precise, but they allowed room for interpretation. That room was where Claire operated best. She reviewed structures she had already mapped in her mind, tracing how information, money, and authority moved through layers that appeared simple on the surface. She did not dismantle anything. She adjusted flow. She redirected pressure. The goal was not to destroy what existed, but to make it stronger, cleaner, and harder to misuse. Resistance appeared almost immediately, though it rarely showed its face openly. Emails went unanswered. Meetings were delayed. Decisions stalled without explanation. Claire recognized the behavior for what it was. People who had grown comfortable in disorder feared clarity. They did not challenge her directly. Instead, they tested her patience. She met each delay calmly, documenting everything without confrontation. When questioned, she explained changes as efficiency, not control. Language mattered. Power responded better to reassurance than force. As weeks passed, Claire learned the true shape of authority. Titles meant little. Influence belonged to those who understood timing and silence. Some individuals spoke often but decided nothing. Others said little and moved everything. Claire observed who reacted when processes changed and who benefited when they remained the same. She adjusted her approach accordingly. She did not argue. She rerouted. Slowly, resistance weakened not because it was defeated but because it was outpaced. Lucas Reed remained close but never intrusive. Their communication was professional, efficient, and frequent. He provided context without direction, offering insight into reactions Claire could not see directly. He did not tell her what to do. He explained consequences. Their relationship deepened through trust built on competence. Lucas saw that Claire did not need protection. She needed information. Claire saw that Lucas did not seek control. He sought stability. Together, they navigated tension carefully. When pushback increased, Lucas warned her where it originated. When she proposed adjustments, he advised how they would be perceived. The exchange was balanced. Neither dominated the other. Respect replaced caution. Claire began to understand that alliances formed through clarity lasted longer than those formed through fear. Her reputation grew quietly. People spoke her name carefully, attaching it to order and resolution. Problems sent to her did not return unresolved. She became the person others deferred to without realizing when it happened. Authority followed her not because it was demanded but because it worked. Claire noticed the shift and did not react outwardly. Inside, she acknowledged it as progress. The empire she rebuilt was not visible. There were no headlines, no celebrations. Systems simply began to function better. Risks decreased. Channels stabilized. Decisions aligned. The council watched without interference. Claire did not seek approval. She delivered results. That was enough. By the end of the restructuring phase, Claire stood at the center of something solid. She had faced resistance and learned its patterns. She had studied power and learned its language. Her work spoke for her. Her reputation followed quietly behind. The rebuilding was complete not because everything was perfect but because it was controlled. Claire allowed herself one private moment of reflection. She was no longer reacting to circumstances. She was shaping them. The empire did not announce her presence, but it moved because of her. She returned to work the next morning without pause, aware that this was only the beginning of what competence could build. Claire Morgan did not expect to see Ethan Blackwood again, but she was not surprised when it happened. He appeared one afternoon in a quiet conference room, unannounced, standing where he did not belong anymore. Time had not softened him. His posture was still precise, his expression controlled, but something beneath it had shifted. The confidence he once carried without effort now required intention. Claire noticed that first. It told her everything before a single word was spoken. Ethan addressed her formally as if distance could restore balance. He spoke her name with restraint, testing how it landed. Claire remained seated, reviewing a document without looking up. Silence stretched between them. It was deliberate. When she finally raised her eyes, she did so calmly without tension. The power in the room had already changed. Ethan felt it. He straightened slightly, adjusting to a position he no longer owned. He began with explanations disguised as conversation. He spoke of misunderstandings, of necessity, of choices made under pressure. Claire listened without interruption. She did not react. She did not correct him. She allowed him to finish because she no longer needed to defend herself. When he stopped speaking, the room felt lighter, as if something old had been set down. Claire responded simply. She told him she understood the decision he had made. Not because it was justified but because it was clear. She said she no longer carried questions about that night. The past no longer required answers. Ethan searched her face for emotion and found none he could use. That unsettled him more than anger ever would have. He shifted the conversation toward work, toward overlap, toward necessity. He suggested cooperation, alignment, a way to move forward without conflict. Claire listened carefully. When she spoke again, her voice was steady. She told him there would be no cooperation beyond defined boundaries. Personal history would not be leveraged. Professional structures would remain separate. She explained this without hostility as one might explain policy. Ethan attempted to reassert familiarity, referencing shared moments, shared beginnings. Claire stopped him gently. She told him that those moments belonged to a version of herself that no longer existed. The statement was not cruel. It was factual. She did not accuse him. She did not blame him. She simply closed the door he had opened. The power reversal was complete then. Ethan realized it and fell silent. Claire stood, signaling the meeting's end. She thanked him for coming and confirmed the professional separation clearly. Their paths would not cross again unless required by structure, not history. She wished him stability. Not success. Stability. Ethan nodded once, accepting what could not be changed. He left without argument. The room felt empty again but not hollow. Claire returned to her work immediately. There was no lingering ache. No unfinished thought. The past had returned, spoken its final words and left. That evening, Claire reflected briefly, not with regret but with clarity. Closure did not come from confrontation. It came from independence. She had reclaimed herself fully, not through revenge but through growth. The chapter was closed. She moved forward without looking back. Claire Morgan discovered the missing funds on an ordinary morning, which was how most dangerous truths revealed themselves. The numbers did not announce their absence loudly. They whispered. A line item that balanced yesterday no longer did. A transfer that should have landed cleanly appeared delayed, then closed. Claire reviewed the ledger again, slower this time. The discrepancy was small enough to be ignored by anyone rushing, but large enough to matter to someone who understood patterns. She did not alert anyone. She saved nothing externally. She simply began to trace. Claire followed the movement backward, mapping transactions through layers that appeared routine. The path was carefully designed, routed through approved channels, masked by compliance. Whoever had done this knew the system well. That narrowed the list quickly. This was not careless loss. It was intentional removal. Claire worked alone late when the building emptied and silence returned. She compared archived records to current ones, noticing how documentation thinned at specific points. Signatures were present but repeated. Approval codes matched when they should not have. The theft was clean, almost elegant. That disturbed her more than chaos ever could. Precision meant confidence. Confidence meant protection. The trail led her to Daniel Zhao. His name surfaced gradually, never alone, always supported by legitimate authority. Daniel operated within Zhao Holdings, but his fingerprints were subtle. He never appeared as the final recipient. He was a conduit. Claire studied his access points, his approvals, his timing. Every move aligned with opportunity. Every absence aligned with disappearance. She did not confront him. She observed. Observation revealed intent faster than accusation. As Claire dug deeper, another name surfaced. Irina Mikhailova. Her involvement was indirect, shielded behind proxies and intermediaries. Claire recognized the design immediately. Irina never touched anything herself. She influenced outcomes by moving others. Daniel Zhao was one of those others. The connection was not written. It was implied through alignment. Funds redirected toward interests Irina favored. Causes she supported. Structures she benefited from. Claire collected evidence quietly. Screenshots taken and deleted. Notes memorized, not written. She understood the value of discretion now. Evidence gathered too loudly disappeared. Evidence gathered silently endured. She waited for confirmation, then waited again. Only when the pattern repeated did she accept the truth fully. The theft was ongoing. The scope was controlled. The intent was strategic. She did not feel anger. She felt clarity. This was not betrayal. It was opportunity. Claire closed the files and returned everything exactly as she found it. No trace of investigation remained. She left the building calmly, her expression unchanged. The system still functioned. The theft continued. And now she understood it. That night, Claire slept without restlessness. The knowledge sat firmly within her. Missing funds were no longer missing. They were mapped, tracked. No. And knowledge, she understood, was leverage. The emergency council meeting was called without ceremony. Claire Morgan received the notice late at night, a single line instructing her to appear before dawn. There was no explanation, no agenda, no reassurance. By the time she arrived, the room was already occupied. The same circular table. The same controlled lighting. Margaret Whitfield and Richard Hale were present, seated apart, their expressions focused and severe. Others filled the remaining seats, quiet and attentive. The atmosphere was tight with urgency but not panic. Claire understood immediately that the theft had been detected. Not publicly. Not officially. Quietly. She took her seat without speaking, allowing the council to begin. Richard Hale outlined the situation carefully. Funds had gone missing in a pattern too deliberate to dismiss. The damage was limited but concerning. Someone inside their extended structure was testing boundaries. Margaret added that direct exposure was not an option. The system could not afford disruption. Control had to be maintained. Claire listened, saying nothing. When the room fell silent, attention shifted toward her. She had expected this. Calmly she spoke. She confirmed the existence of the theft without revealing how long she had known. She described the structure of the removal in neutral terms, focusing on method rather than blame. Her tone was steady, analytical. The council did not interrupt. This was not a defense. It was an assessment. The decision came quickly. They would not stop the theft immediately. Instead, they would allow it to continue under observation. False intelligence would be introduced carefully, designed to misdirect those responsible. The goal was not recovery. It was exposure. Claire was asked if she could design such a strategy. She answered simply, yes. She outlined the trap clearly. Selective data would be leaked through trusted channels, suggesting vulnerability where none existed. Adjustments would appear sloppy but would be intentional. The false intelligence would lead the thief toward a controlled endpoint, one that revealed every link in the chain. Timing was critical. Too fast would raise suspicion. Too slow would lose momentum. The council approved the plan unanimously. Then came the most delicate element. An inside source was needed. Someone close enough to be believed, distant enough to be disposable if necessary. Claire spoke the name without hesitation. Ethan Blackwood. The room reacted quietly. Margaret watched Claire carefully. Richard considered the implications. Claire explained that Ethan's access and history made him ideal. His motivations were predictable. His credibility remained intact. And he was already emotionally invested. Contact was made discreetly. Ethan agreed faster than expected. Not out of loyalty but calculation. He believed participation would protect his position. He believed he was controlling the exchange. Claire allowed him to believe this. Instructions were given precisely, limiting what he knew and when. He became a conduit, nothing more. By the end of the meeting, the plan was set. False intelligence would move. The trap would close slowly. Claire gathered her notes, then left the room without ceremony. The long game had begun. The fundraiser at the Halcyon Gallery was designed to look harmless. Soft lighting filled the space, reflecting off white walls and polished floors. Art lined the gallery in careful order, each piece selected to suggest culture, generosity, and restraint. Guests arrived in measured waves, dressed elegantly, speaking in low voices. Nothing about the evening suggested danger. That was the point. Violence never arrived where it was expected. It arrived where people felt safe. Claire Morgan entered the gallery calmly, her posture relaxed, her expression neutral. She wore nothing that drew attention. To anyone watching, she looked like another administrator fulfilling a public obligation. Only a few people in the room understood the weight of her presence. Fewer still understood the risk attached to it. Claire felt the awareness settle over her like a second skin. She did not scan the room openly. She sensed it. Irina Mikhailova's shooters moved into position early. They blended in as guests, donors, and hired staff. Their movements were subtle, rehearsed, and confident. Each knew their role. Each knew their exit. The plan was simple. Quick, clean. The chaos would be mistaken for an accident or a random act. Claire would be gone, and the structure she supported would weaken quietly. That was the intent. The council had anticipated this. Security measures were layered invisibly throughout the gallery. Plainclothes operatives stood among guests, their focus narrow and precise. Surveillance ran live, feeding data to observers positioned beyond the building. Every unfamiliar movement was tracked. Every shift in posture was noted. The room appeared calm, but beneath it, control was absolute. Claire moved through the space at a measured pace. She greeted donors politely, exchanged brief words, and positioned herself exactly where she had been instructed. She felt the moment tighten. The air changed subtly the way it did before a storm. One shooter adjusted his stance. Another shifted closer. Their timing aligned. The council moved. The interception was swift and silent. A hand caught a wrist before a weapon could clear fabric. A shoulder pressed into a chest, redirecting momentum. Two shooters were restrained within seconds, their movements neutralized without sound. A third attempted to flee but was intercepted near a service corridor. To the guests, nothing appeared unusual. Laughter continued. Music played. The fundraiser remained intact. Claire did not move. She did not react. She trusted the process she had helped design. When it was over, she was guided gently toward a side exit under the pretense of a private call. Her heart beat steadily. She was alive. That was enough. Evidence was collected immediately. Weapons, communications, confirmations of payment. Everything needed was secured before the night ended. Claire was escorted away without attention. The gallery returned to its purpose. Donations were pledged. Smiles remained. No one spoke of what almost happened. That was how control survived. Later, in a quiet room, Claire reviewed the confirmation calmly. Irina's involvement was undeniable now. The attempt had failed. The proof had succeeded. Claire closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. She had survived. And now the truth was locked in place. The full council summit convened behind closed doors, guarded by silence and intent. This meeting was not routine. Every seat around the circular table was filled, every presence deliberate. The air carried a weight that could not be mistaken for caution alone. This was resolution. Claire Morgan entered last, her posture steady, her expression composed. She carried no documents in her hands. Everything she needed was already secured. Margaret Whitfield called the session to order without ceremony. There were no pleasantries. No delays. Everyone present understood the purpose of the gathering. Irina Mikhailova sat across the table, calm and immaculate, her confidence intact. She appeared unbothered, almost amused. Publicly she remained powerful. Privately, the ground beneath her was already fractured. Claire was invited to speak. She stood slowly, allowing the room to settle. When she began, her voice was clear and measured. She presented the proof without embellishment. Timelines, transfers, communications. Each piece aligned cleanly with the next. The attempted assassination was placed within context, supported by evidence gathered quietly and methodically. Nothing was speculative. Nothing relied on emotion. The truth unfolded like a map revealing itself. As Claire spoke, the room changed. Margaret listened without interruption. Richard Hale's expression hardened as confirmation replaced doubt. Council members exchanged looks, recognizing the precision of the exposure. Irina remained silent, her composure unwavering, but her eyes shifted. She understood what was happening. This was not accusation. This was conclusion. When Claire finished, the evidence was displayed openly. The council reviewed it together, not as adversaries but as judges. Irina attempted to respond, framing events as misunderstandings, suggesting manipulation by others. Her arguments were smooth, practiced, and ineffective. The structure she relied on had already turned. The proof did not require defense. Margaret spoke once, calmly announcing that Irina's actions constituted a breach beyond forgiveness. Richard followed, confirming the decision. The council moved unanimously. Irina's influence was revoked in full. Her access terminated. Her protections withdrawn. The exposure would be public, controlled, and complete. This was not exile disguised as discretion. This was removal. Ethan Blackwood was brought in briefly, summoned to confirm his position. He stood rigidly, absorbing the reality before him. When asked, he ended the engagement without hesitation. Not in anger. In survival. His voice did not shake. The decision was final. The room accepted it without comment. Ethan was dismissed immediately afterward, his role concluded. Irina stood as the verdict settled. For the first time, her control fractured. She said nothing as security approached. The council did not look at her again. She was escorted out without resistance, her power dismantled in silence. By morning, her name would be removed from every structure that had once protected her. Her banishment was absolute. Claire remained standing as the room emptied. She felt no triumph. Only closure. The council acknowledged her contribution formally, then adjourned. The fall was complete. Claire left the chamber knowing one truth clearly. Power did not scream when it ended. It disappeared. Claire Morgan was summoned again, but this time the tone was different. There was no urgency, no tension pressed into the air. The room felt settled, as if something unfinished had finally been resolved. Margaret Whitfield and Richard Hale were already seated when Claire entered. Their expressions were calm, measured, and expectant. This was not a meeting to correct damage. It was a meeting to decide direction. Margaret spoke first. She acknowledged Claire's role in stabilizing operations, exposing internal threats, and preserving the integrity of the council's structure. The words were formal, but the meaning beneath them was personal. Claire had proven something rare. Not loyalty. Judgment. That distinction mattered. Richard followed by extending the offer clearly and without flourish. Director of Strategic Operations. Full authority. Defined scope. Long-term mandate. The title settled heavily in the room. Claire did not respond immediately. She understood what the role represented. It was not power in the visible sense. It was influence over movement, timing, and outcome. It meant shaping futures quietly. It meant responsibility that did not end. Claire asked for time. Not to negotiate terms, but to consider herself. The council granted it without hesitation. Before the meeting ended, Margaret added one more matter. A personal one. She revealed information that had been sealed deliberately, protected until Claire proved capable of carrying it. Margaret spoke the name Julia Rinaldi. The name struck Claire with unexpected force. It belonged to a lineage associated with discretion, legacy, and quiet stewardship. Julia Rinaldi had been more than a name. She had been a guardian of influence long before the current structures existed. Margaret explained that Claire's connection to Julia was not symbolic. It was direct. Bloodline. Inheritance not of wealth, but of responsibility. Claire listened in silence as fragments of history aligned. Certain protections she had received. Certain doors that opened without explanation. They were not accidents. They were acknowledgments of legacy waiting to be claimed. When the meeting ended, Claire walked alone through the quiet halls. The offer and the revelation weighed equally. She had built herself through adversity, through restraint and intelligence. Now she learned that part of her path had been shaped long before she understood it. The knowledge unsettled her. Identity felt less solid when history reached forward to claim it. That night, Claire sat by the window of her apartment, watching the city move below. She thought about the woman she had been before the wedding. Before exile. Before usefulness. She thought about the name she carried and the name she could have carried. Julia Rinaldi represented continuity. Claire Morgan represented choice. The question was not which name held more power. It was which future she wanted to accept. She considered the role offered. Director of Strategic Operations meant commitment to a world she had learned to navigate but never planned to inhabit. It meant shaping systems that affected lives she would never meet. It meant becoming something permanent. The legacy offered answers to questions she had not known how to ask. But it also threatened to define her by origin rather than action. Claire understood then that inheritance did not remove choice. It complicated it. She could accept the role and the legacy, shaping both on her own terms. Or she could walk away carrying the knowledge without the title. Neither path was simple. Both required courage. As the night deepened, Claire reached clarity. She did not yet decide. But she knew one thing with certainty. Whatever she chose would be hers alone. The inheritance was real. So was her autonomy. And the future would have to make room for both. Claire Morgan accepted the position on her own terms. She did not stand before the council seeking approval or validation. She spoke with clarity, having weighed the cost of authority and the value of restraint. She agreed to become Director of Strategic Operations only under conditions she defined herself. Her authority would be clear, her scope precise, and her independence protected. She would not be owned, inherited, or quietly replaced. Margaret Whitfield listened without interruption. Richard Hale confirmed the terms without resistance. The acceptance was recorded, witnessed, and sealed. Claire left the chamber without ceremony, knowing the choice was complete. The following week, she moved into a new residence. It stood above the city, quiet and controlled, designed for reflection rather than display. The space was simple, intentional, and fully hers. There were no guards at the door and no hidden cameras in the walls. Security existed, but it answered to her alone. For the first time in years, she slept without listening for control or waiting for consequences. The silence felt honest, not enforced. Once settled, Claire began introducing policy changes. They were subtle, structural, and deliberate. Oversight was clarified, redundancies removed, and protections redistributed. Silence was no longer purchased, it was earned. Systems were redesigned to function ethically without weakening influence. Power was no longer hidden behind fear. It was disciplined, measured, and accountable. Those who had thrived under chaos resisted at first, then adapted. Those who relied on intimidation were quietly replaced. Claire did not remove people without cause. She removed systems that allowed harm to continue unchecked. Her approach spread without announcement. Meetings became shorter. Decisions became clearer. Outcomes became predictable. The council adjusted to her rhythm, trusting results rather than force. Claire did not seek loyalty. She built reliability. Over time, the structure responded not to pressure but to consistency. That shift mattered more than authority ever could. In private moments, Claire reflected often. She thought about the name Giulia Rinaldi and the legacy it carried. She honored it by refusing to be defined by it. Inheritance, she understood, was not destiny. Choice remained the final authority. Power did not come from position alone. It came from knowing when to speak, when to wait, and when to walk away. She no longer feared silence, loss, or exposure. She valued herself without witness. The woman who had once signed away her life in quiet shock now authored policy with intention. She had chosen herself fully without apology. The city moved below her window, unchanged and unaware. Claire stood steady, understanding that power no longer loomed over her. It rested where it belonged, shaped by discipline and self-respect. Her story did not end in triumph or spectacle. It ended in ownership. Claire turned from the glass, ready for what came next, not because she was unafraid, but because she was certain. She had chosen her future, defined her worth, and claimed her place without surrender. The woman who chose herself did not need permission. The story ended there.